Today I show you a tutorial on how to applique those circles effortlessly on each background. Hello my quilt enthusiasts! Today we dance our way to this fabulous Dance With Me quilt. It is inspired by vintage vinyl records, or you can say by CDs. And I made it from the brand new Bluish collection, which has just hit stores. I designed this Dance With Me quilt in a queen size format, and all these circles which are appliqued have different types. So some are just plain fabrics, others have a inner ring appliqued, and others have pieced circles. And one of the most complicated is type number D, which is sewn on foundation paper piecing. So since that is the most different one, I show you this one today in the tutorial, because if you master this one, all the other ones will be a piece of cake for you. So what will you need to make your Dance With Me quilt? First, you need your background fabric. This should read like a solid. So you could go with a Bella solid, you could go with one of our spotted. Our spotted series has more than 200 different colors meanwhile. And then for your vinyl records, you go for assorted prints which go well with each other. You could use your stash, or you can easily go with a pre-cut format, such as a Fat Quarter bundle, a Fat 8 bundle, or if you are very frugal, you could go with a layer cake even, but then I would add a little bit of yardage here and there, so you don't run out of your prints. And then you also bring in an accentuating color. So I used this orange for my Bluish series. It is also one of my spotted series. In addition, you need some extra supplies. You need a monofilament thread, a clear one. And I recommend YLI. This brand brings a very thin, weak thread like a hair, which takes heat easily, so it doesn't melt when you press your circles on. And also you need freezer paper. You can buy the freezer paper on a roll, but for our purpose it's better to buy them in sheets which have US letter size and you can print on directly. Those have a shiny side where the wax is on, but we will print on the matte side. Now when we have put all our materials together, we are ready, and I will demonstrate you the circle D, the most complicated one, so you know all the tips and tricks for the other ones too. Set up. So let's go over to our sewing studio. You see, for our Dance With Me quilt, we have 6 different types of circles. Those are quite simple to piece together, but this one is a little bit tricky. We need 2 segments, segment 1 and segment 2, so we need the foundation paper piecing technique for that one. I prepared already circle D here, and it has to be cut out very accurately. And I also brought in that extra circle for the inner ring, so I am able to demonstrate that piece to you too. And now we will split it into those 2 segments. Okay, let's start with this one. I like to prepare my templates in advance. So with a pin, I give it a scratch where the crease should go. And I also mark the 1/4 inch seam allowance with a pencil. Now, when I flip it over, I have to place my fabric on the waxed side of the freezer paper, like that. So this pencil line gives me an idea where my edge should go, and these are my both fabrics right sides onto each other, matching that edge, and I pin it in place. This is how our paper piece segment looks like. Next, we want to press it. So let's turn it around. So now you will notice that the waxed side of our freezer paper sticks to the fabric, which we want to. We have now to trim off this edge to a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now when we have sawn segment 1, we are on to segment 2. This time the saw allowance points into the opposite direction. I've already prepared that little piece of paper. So flip it around. Bring my fabric to the marked line and place the other one right sides on top. Pin it in place. And now let's check if both fabrics are good covered. Yes. So I can saw along on this line over here. And so. Now we have to trim off this part, leaving a 1/4 inch seam allowance here. Okay, next we want to saw the 2 segments together. So we flip that one over and we have to pin exactly through this crossing point here, like that. So your needle should come out in the ditch of the seam. And now we have to pin exactly in the ditch again, while coming out on the marking of the sew allowance. So while we keep our perpendicular pin in place, we now make the edges congruent, like that. And then with our clips, we hold those edges in place. Now we can remove the pin. I go back to my regular stitch length, 2.5. You never know if you have to rip off this seam, so it's easier if you are on the larger scale here. And now I saw exactly along this paper edge. I'm really happy with the matching point. I press my seam now open. Now I cut out my circle and trim off the excess fabric, leaving approximately 3/8 of an inch for my seam allowance. This has to be just roughly that size. You don't have to be too exact here. You just want to have a little bit left over to fold over the paper edge later. Next I want to have a running stitch, and I changed my sewing machine settings, so I enlarged the stitch length quite a bit, and I also loosened my thread tension a bit. So now I sew inside my seam allowance the complete round. Now I take the both loose ends of my seam threads and I start pulling so that here the excess fabric will be gathered around my paper shape. I have to be very careful not to break my thread while pulling. At this stage, I go over to my pressing board and give it a good press. You could even spray a little bit starch on that shape so that it stays in shape when you pull out the paper later, but I'm fine with that. And the paper inside gives you the stability to make this circle really round. The next thing for our demo here is to insert the inner ring for the vinyl record. And this is quite a bit a tricky thing. So what we need here to help us is we need a freezer paper shape, and it should be 3-inch width. And also I have prepared a Wonder Under paper, the same width, but I also marked a 2-inch diameter, and I have marked those both middle lines. So, and I need a fabric circle which should be about 1/4 inch larger. So I cut this one to 3.5 inch width. So here comes my circle cutter in handy, because I can really, with this scale, I can determine how wide it should be. So I just start cutting my fabric, and you also can cut your freezer paper and Wonder Under paper with this handy tool here. It allows you to have really a smooth edge without any puckers in it. When I now iron my freezer paper on, I have a good 1/4 inch extra fabric which I can fold over. I will do that in the same manner as I did with our first step here, and to give you a shortcut, I have already prepared this little circle. See, the edges are nice and smooth. To keep those edges crisp and the seam allowance folded, you can give it a bit of starch to keep it in place. So next, we want to pull out the freezer paper, and then we will press on our Wonder Under over that piece, because the glue on the Wonder Under will keep our seam allowance in place so that it can't flip back. I pull out my freezer paper here, and to hold my seam allowance in place, I now iron on my Wonder Under shape. Next, I want to insert my ring in the center of my vinyl record. So therefore, I have first to pull out the freezer paper. It's no longer needed. Let me pull out that one. I will place the right side onto the wrong side of the fabric. This is really crucial to get it right. We are used to place right sides together, but in this case, it's a different thing. So first we want to know where are the middle lines of this large circle. To get it, we just fold it in halves. and give it a good crease. Now I can place these middle lines aligned to my creases and pin it in place. And next, on to the sewing machine. Again, I have a really small stitch length, only 1.5, and I help myself by holding the center point of the circle with my pin in place so it is fixed and the machine can just sew around. You can see my circle is exactly round. It's not exactly on my marking line, but I don't care about that. Next, I want to rip off my Wonder Under paper, and therefore I give it just a scratch with my pin like that. So it is easy to open it and rip it off. Next, you want to cut a hole inside my seam line. And we want to leave only a little bit of seam allowance left over. I will use my zigzag scissors for that one. And in order that the seam allowance can be opened up to a wider diameter, we have to clip it in so it can really open. So we clip just before the seam all the way around. Now we go to the ironing board and bring this inner ring in place. Now you might wonder, how can we bring this ring on the front? Well, that's not too hard to do. We just turn it to the front side like that, piece by piece, until we have the complete ring turned out. See? Now we have to get it a little bit in shape, stretch it where needed, so that our outer ring lies flat and nice. And with the Wonder under this ring, we can now press it in place and it will stick. That's really, really cool. Look at that. From both sides. So here we can also get all those little puckers out of the way. So it's really nice and flat. Like that. And like that. So now we have really smooth curves, clean seams, and it holds and sticks in place. Now for the purpose of our demonstration here, I have just this little square representing our complete background. And you will have marking lines for your rows and for your columns. And these marking lines go just through the center of a row and a column. So next we want to position our circle. Therefore we fold it in halves and give it a crease like that. So with these creases, we can position the circle in the middle so that the midpoint is well centered. And pin it in place and then go to our sewing machine.
Come on.
Now you could, of course, sew on your circles by hand stitching and you would use a blind stitch. But if you want to save a little bit of time, you can go to your machine. And my settings here are the blind stitch. I use my clear thread for the upper thread, and in my bobbin I have just my regular cotton thread. So let's just so along the outer edge here. Once I'm done with my outer edge, I also fix the ring here. And in a very last step, I stitch my inner ring onto the background. So this is how our finished vinyl record looks on the background. Isn't this pretty? I mean, if you shy away from this tricky inner ring, so just leave it out. Now when you have learned how to sew on your circle onto the background, let's talk a little bit about the layout. So our layout is basically a grid of horizontal and vertical rows and columns, I would say. And it's a little bit tricky to mark those because this is really a monster of a background to spread out on a floor or a table. So I could recommend to pin it on your mattress if you have a large bed, for example. And then get your chalk marker out and you will mark only the middle line of those rows and columns. And then later you can fold your circles in half and give it a good crease and align this crease with your marked background lines. That's the easiest way to know where to place the circle. As for the quilting, I enhanced my vinyl shapes by a circle echo quilting around so they really pop up. And then for the border I have this meandering, which is very even. You can also go with an all-over panto, but I say such a circle echo quilting makes your vinyl records really shine. So this is the tips for layout and quilting, and we will have our patterns in a huge discount sale this weekend only. We will have 25% off on all our patterns, and you will find a coupon code in the description box below. So have fun starting your own Dance With Me project. See you next time around.